Which camera do I look at? Which one? That one. Cool.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode 4 of the Disclosing the Secret Space Program series. In the first 3 episodes, we covered the testimony of William Tompkins, we've covered the testimony of Corey Goode, and also of whistleblower Niara Isley. Now, in this episode, we're going to cover the testimony and work of Emery Smith. We'll be doing a live Q&A and also showing an interview with him. But first, I'm going to be presenting on invention secrecy and deep underground military bases. So let's get started. Now, first let's talk about the Invention Secrecy Act. Now, the Invention Secrecy Act was a law enacted in 1951 designed to prevent the public disclosure of sciences and technologies and patents that presented a possible national security threat. Now, this specific secrecy order bars the award of a patent and orders that the invention be kept secret. It also restricts the filing of foreign patents, and it specifies procedures to prevent disclosure of the ideas and concepts contained in the application. So this was a law enacted almost 6 decades ago, back in 1951. And what's amazing is that the decision to classify patents as top secret and possibly even more secret than that is made by various agencies. So pretty much any agency, whether it's the Navy, the Army, the State Department, even the Department of Energy, NASA, the Justice Department, all of these agencies have the authority to classify a patent secret. And the Invention Secrecy Act makes these PACs, makes these gag orders essentially permanent. So through the order, any invention that is suppressed is essentially permanently suppressed as long as that order is not renewed. So every year there is a renewal process, and if a patent was deemed classified, that renewal can be renewed, and thus the patent still maintains its secrecy. So we could have patents that were filed in the 1960s and 70s that could very well still be classified to this day. And the only way an inventor can avoid the risk of their patent being secret is to forego patent protection if they are in this country. So quick hint, if you actually file for the patent to be approved in another country, say Canada, they don't have the same committee nor the same standards, the same acts and laws that we do here. So you can actually file for patent protection in Canada. If you're approved, you have 1 year to then file for that patent to be approved in America here. But actually, since the patent's already in the public domain in another country, then they cannot strike it private, they can't strike it secret in America. So that is one potential way that you can go around the Invention Secrecy Act. But if you apply for a patent in America and it has some potentially sensitive sciences or concepts in that patent application, they can easily strike it classified, and then the patent will never see the light of day. Now, thousands of patents have been deemed classified ever since the Invention Secrecy Act was enacted, and tens of thousands of patents are manually examined each year under this act, and FOIA requests filed by independent groups such as the Federation of American Scientists have found documents stating that the amount of classified patents ranges anywhere from 5,000 to 6,000 depending on the given year, and it has been this way since the early 90s. So we don't necessarily have data from the 50s, 60s, 70s, or 80s showing how many patents were classified, but as of the early 90s, as of 1991, we got our very first figure, and the count was about in the low 5,000s then. The most recent count as of the end of fiscal year 2017 stated that the amount of classified patents is 5,784. So that's the most recent count. And of course, like I said, every year they can decide whether to renew the gag order or to not renew it. And a decision to not renew the gag order might be had because, say, the concepts or the sciences in the patent are no longer pertinent, they're no longer a threat to national security per se, or if it is, if they still want to keep the sciences and concepts secret, of course they can renew it every year as per their desire. And one note needs to be had on the idea of national security. Now, that concept, that terminology for reasons of national security is extremely vague. It's probably one of the most vague terminologies to throw out there, and they can essentially deem anything classified for whatever reason if they term it as being a threat to national security. So you can see how they can easily use that wording to strike anything secret. And the majority of patents classified have to do with paradigm-changing technologies. Now, first, it is understandable that some technologies may be classified because we would not want certain nefarious people or bad actors to get their hands on these technologies. So say if there was a patent that had to do with microwave radiation, or it could be sciences or concepts that could be used to develop directed energy weapons, well then yes, we want those patents to be secret. We don't want particular people to get their hands on that kind of technology. But now, many of these classified patents have to do with energy technologies, with actual free energy. And there's actually a document that was made in the early 1970s. You can see right here, it was called the Armed Services Patent Advisory Board, the ASPAB, and they made a review list of patent security categories. And in this review list, you can see here, item 8, so any technology, any patent that has to do with solar voltaic generators that have more of a 20% efficiency, they automatically classify that as top secret. And item number 9 here, any energy conversion system with conversion efficiencies in excess of 70 to 80%, those are automatically deemed classified. So according to that nonpartisan group, the Federation of American Scientists, you can check them out at fas.org. They've done great work in tracking the secrecy orders, the number of secrecy orders, and the fine details behind that. They've stated that probably 70 to 80% of these classified patents would be a threat to the oil cartels, the fossil fuel industries. They have to do with technologies that the military-industrial complex and the power structures in control do not want released, because that would threaten their power. That would threaten the control that they have through the financial system, through the energy systems, and whatnot. So it must be understood that, yes, it's understandable that some technologies would be kept classified, but again, the idea of a threat to national security is extremely vague, and most things, most inventions that are deemed classified could literally save us, save our planet, and need to be revealed. So that is extremely important to note. And now let's also talk about some of these scientists and inventions that were suppressed by much more direct illegal means. So of course, using the Invention Secrecy Act, no matter how frivolous or ridiculous their excuse is to classify patents top secret, that is still technically legal. Even if it's an invention or a science that could completely change our society, they can still legally make that patent classified. Now there's been a lot of other scientists, researchers, and inventions that have been suppressed by much more illegal means, and I have a list of many of them here. So we can talk about Wilhelm Reich in the upper left. Now, Wilhelm Reich was the psychologist who invented the idea of orgone energy. And he was, of course, heavily suppressed by the FDA and the US government for doing that. And he actually created a device that could accumulate this life force energy that he called orgone, and it was an orgone AC motor, if I believe correctly. But that was one of the many inventions, one of the many reasons that Wilhelm Reich was vehemently suppressed, and his books were literally burned by the FDA. We also have Stan Meyer. Stan Meyer invented a car that ran purely on hydrogen extracted from tap water, and he invented this in the 1980s, 1990s. And his story is that when he went to a Cracker Barrel restaurant with his brother in 1998 to meet with NATO officials for what he thought was to be ways to get his technology out into the public, he went and took a sip of his cranberry juice. He ran out of the restaurant and he collapsed to the ground, screaming to his brother, "They poisoned me." And this is actually in the police report about his death. Now, his death is attributed publicly, depending on who you ask, to either being food poisoning or a brain aneurysm. but it is in the actual police report that he was screaming that he was poisoned. Now, of course, if his technology got into the public domain that we could run cars on water, that would lose some very powerful people quite a bit of money on their gas and oil revenues. So you can connect the dots there as to why Stan Meyer would be assassinated as such. Then we have the story of Dr. Fred Bell. Dr. Fred Bell was an inventor and an energy researcher and an activist found dead of, quote, natural causes, they termed it, 2 days after filming an episode on Jesse Ventura's series called Conspiracy Theory, where he was discussing directed energy weapon technology. And of course, directed energy weapon technology pretty much goes hand in hand with zero-point energy, anti-gravity, and that whole system of science that is kept suppressed. Now, Fred Bell being found dead of natural causes 2 days after filming this episode, very, very mysterious. We have the work of John Hutchinson. John Hutchinson was a Canadian researcher and experimenter. He experimented with how to actually levitate objects. There's videos out there of him using electromagnetic fields to levitate even 70-pound cannonballs. And he was vehemently suppressed again by Canadian authorities. He was tracked, and I believe there was some issues with his warehouses and his inventions. And of course, there is the character assassination that goes on with pretty much anybody in this industry in the mainstream media. They'll run articles calling these people crazy, calling their inventions wacko, and trying to discredit all that's going on. We have the work of T. Townsend Brown. T. Townsend Brown was doing research into how to make metal discs levitate, what he called electrogravitics, or you can term it as anti-gravity, but it's more specifically technically termed as electrogravitics. He was doing this research in the 1940s and 50s. And luckily in T. Townsend Brown's case, he first filed for a patent overseas in Europe. Now, also luckily for T. Townsend Brown, much of his research was pre-Invention Secrecy Act, so they couldn't classify his patents as top secret initially. And also, luckily for him, he filed his patent first in Britain, which was awarded to him for his research. But in T. Townsend Brown's case, it's very little is known what actually eventually happened to his research. Some people believe that he was threatened to secrecy and that his research ended up in the hands of the military-industrial complex. And after that happened, he didn't speak about it because of a gag order or a threat upon his being or his life. Other people believe that he was actually very happy to give his research over to the military-industrial complex, and he actually worked with them as a consultant after that case. So whatever happened to T. Townsend Brown, we don't specifically know, but there's another example of somebody's research that could have been paradigm-changing technologies that went secret, went black. Then we also have two other people here that I want to mention. Ariel Louise. Now, Ariel Louise was actually the grandniece of Nikola Tesla, and she was a very renowned activist. She was she had a lot of work ethic. She held radio shows. She held a lot of engagements around the country trying to get the word out there. She was a PhD chemist. She had a very well-studied background in collegiate studies, and she was actually found dead in 2007 with a lot of mysterious circumstances surrounding her death. And while they claim it was to be on public record the cause of a heat wave going through her area in where she was living in Minnesota in 2007, some people also say there's far more to that story and far more mysteriousness surrounding that. And then lastly, we have the work of T. Henry Murray, who T. Henry Murray was also doing research into free energy before the Invention Secrecy Act, but there was some very illegal suppression in regards to him. His warehouse was burned down. There was a lot of mysterious matters surrounding his inventions, his devices even being found broken when he would get to his lab and find his device just sabotaged there on the table. So there is just a few examples there of many researchers who have been suppressed by very illegal means. And now let's talk about a few more details on that Secrecy Act. Let's actually go through some of the very specific wording that is in there. So let's dissect it. The Secretary of Commerce is actually the man who orders these inventions to be kept secret. And the Secretary of Commerce gets his, essentially his recommendations to strike something secret from the heads of the three-letter agencies themselves. So like I mentioned earlier, the heads of the agencies, whether it's NASA, Department of Energy, the Navy, the Air Force, CIA, FBI, whatever the case is, the head of these agencies are the ones who make the call to deem a patent classified, but they actually have to send that recommendation to the Secretary of Commerce, and then the Secretary of Commerce is the one who signs off on it. So he's the one who orders the inventions to be kept secret. The Secretary of Commerce is also the person who renews the order at the end of each renewal period, usually at the end of every year, like I mentioned earlier. And then the Secretary of Commerce also has the authority to rescind any order if notified by the heads of the department or the chief officer of said agencies. And if an invention is no longer detrimental to national security, he can also rescind those gag orders. So it's really the Secretary of Commerce who has the authority to keep these inventions secret. And of course, many of these inventions are not, in fact, detrimental to national security. So that needs to be known. It needs to be known who actually has the authority and who strikes these patents secret, so we can really put the pressure on them and understand who is the one keeping these patents from us and who is the one we can put the heat on to then declassify them, right? So let's then talk about invention secrecy orders, how they are not renewed when the country is under national emergency. And this ties into some very recent executive orders that were signed within the last few months. It's April 2018 now. I'm going to reference here an executive order that was signed in December 21st, 2017, so only about 4 months ago. And this executive order was called the Executive Order Blocking the Property of Persons Involved in Serious Human Rights Abuse or Corruption. And a particular passage in that executive order says right here, from the President, I therefore determine that serious human rights abuse and corruption around the world constitute an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security, foreign policy, and economy of the United States. And I hereby declare a national emergency to deal with that threat. So in this executive order, we had it publicly stated and officially stated that America, the United States, is now under threat of national security, or national emergency, excuse me. So we are under a state of national emergency to deal with the threat of, quote, human rights abuse and corruption. So this order has implications in many areas of government involvement, not just invention secrecy. But when it comes to invention secrecy, this is an added dimension where this executive order might be able to be used, because it says that we are under threat of national emergency. And in the Invention Secrecy Act, it actually says an order in effect or issued during a national emergency declared by the President shall remain in effect for the duration of the national emergency and 6 months thereafter. So during a national emergency, these gag orders can essentially be looked at again. They can be either renewed or not renewed, and then upon the ending of the national emergency, it can be, these can easily be brought out to the public. The gag orders can not be renewed. So let's take a look. Who exactly is the Secretary of Commerce right now? Well, the Secretary of Commerce is a wealthy businessman named Wilbur Ross, and he was appointed as the Secretary of Commerce for the current political administration, and he's been given some interesting tasks in regards to space. And this is an article here by the Wall Street Journal that just came out about 4 days ago on April 16th, 2018, about 5 days ago. And it actually says here, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross gains more sway over space issues. And the subtitle says, Department will oversee the nation's first comprehensive space traffic management policy. Now, this is interesting because we would figure if we were going to have a space traffic management policy, most people would figure that would either fall under the authority of NASA, maybe even fall under the authority of the Air Force. But it's very interesting to note that this is falling under the authority of the Secretary of Commerce, of the actual commerce institution right there. So the question goes to note, could this tie in any way in an effort to disclose technologies, patents, and various secret space programs in a kind of a long-term scenario? Of course, there's a lot of other things that need to be taken into account when disclosing secret space programs and the associated technologies, but could this present something that has to do with that? Could we be looking at essentially a long game plan to disclose these technologies? Could very well be. And it goes to note that on Trump's inauguration day, that there was a quote in his inauguration speech that very much applies here. And that quote is, "We stand at the birth of a new millennium, ready to unlock the mysteries of space, to free the earth from the miseries of disease, and to harness the energies, industries, and technologies of tomorrow." Now, with a new perspective as to what's going on with everything in regards to the political climate right now, we could parse this quote right here and get a whole new meaning on it. And this could very well tie, of course, in the efforts to disclose space programs and technologies. So now let's take a minute here to discuss special access programs and what's called unacknowledged special access programs. So when talking about invention secrecy, how all of this is kept secret, not only the inventions, but what these patents and inventions go to build out in secret military and government and corporate projects, we need to discuss how that is kept secret and how it is all compartmentalized and kept unacknowledged. So let's first define what a special access program is, or an SAP. Now, a special access program in the U.S. federal government is a security protocol that provides highly classified information with safeguards and access restrictions that exceed those for regular classified information. So this is anything that is classified in a special access program is essentially more secret than top secret, because you have to have particular access to be read into a special access program. You could have a top secret clearance, but that still doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get read into what's going on in a special access program. But that's just what a special access program is. You might not be able to be read into it, but you still know it exists. You can still see the name of the project and that it is existing. Now let's talk about an unacknowledged special access program. And we're going to refer to an operating manual supplement that was written in 1995 and it's called the National Industrial Security Program document here. And in this document, it actually defines what exactly an unacknowledged special access program is. So right here you can see within the DoD, the Department of Defense, there are 3 categories of special access programs, and there are 2 types. So the 3 categories just basically means where that special access program falls into. It might be one of acquisition, it might be one of intelligence, it might be one of operations and support, but then there's another completely different type of special access program, and it's called a USAP, or an unacknowledged special access program. And right here it defines it. So an acknowledged special access program is a program which may be openly recognized or known, like I've mentioned. However, the specifics are classified within that SAP. The existence of an unacknowledged SAP, or an unacknowledged portion of an acknowledged SAP, special access program, so essentially it umbrellas down, and there can be secret programs hidden within less secret programs. There's just a very comprehensive, a very deep structure in which this is all kept secret. But an unacknowledged program essentially will not be made known to any person not authorized for that information, otherwise known as not on a need-to-know basis, as it's popularly known as. So anybody that's not in that unacknowledged special access program essentially will not know about it. If you're not read into the program, you're not going to get any information or really even any confirmation it exists for anybody that is read in on that USAP. And that even goes for anybody who you would think has authority over that USAP. So even members of Congress, even people who have a higher rank within the military, even the president himself may not be read in on various unacknowledged special access programs. So say, just for understanding purposes, say you are somebody in the military and you have the rank of a colonel or a lieutenant colonel or whatever the case is, and you are in a USAP, even if a general or Congress itself asks you for information or confirmation that that USAP exists, you will tell them that you know nothing about it. And you will tell them that according to your knowledge, it does not exist. And that's how the secrecy is maintained within these USAPs, is because of how compartmentalized it is. And the people in those projects, they don't talk about them. So that's why they're called unacknowledged, is because they go unacknowledged. It's very difficult to find information about something when nobody will tell you it even exists, let alone information within that special access program that's really going on. So let's talk about what funnels into these unacknowledged special access programs, not just the SAPs, the special access programs that are on public record, but what goes into the stuff that is unacknowledged, that we can only get hints and glimpses and people with their testimony giving us basic ideas of what is actually going into these USAPs. So first of all, let's talk about the money. We can definitely gather how much money is being used in unacknowledged programs, and that's because of how badly the books are for the Defense Department. There are so many dots that are not connecting and things that are missing, misadjustments, as sometimes they're technically called, within the Defense Department budget. And let's go through a very quick timeline here to really give you a visualization of how much money and resources have gone to build out secret military and government projects. So first, let's start in 2001, which was about 17 years ago now. So we're going to reference Donald Rumsfeld and how on September 10th, 2001, Donald Rumsfeld actually testified to Congress about $2.3 trillion that were missing from the Defense Department budget. And this was just in a matter of about 2 to 3 years that they were looking at the budget from 1998 to 2000, and they found over a span of 2 to 3 years there that they had $2.3 trillion in certain adjustments that just didn't make sense. Donald Rumsfeld was asked about that by Dr. Cynthia McKinney, former Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney, on the congressional floor on September 10th, 2001, and he admitted to it. But of course, the next day, certain events happened, and everybody then forgot about it. So $2.3 trillion in 2001. And we'll fast forward about 14 years ahead of that to 2015. In 2015, through a Department of Defense Inspector General report that was released, it showed that that number that you can see here, the articles of it, the U.S. Army fudged its accounts by trillions of dollars, the auditor finds, and they found that that number of misadjustments was now up to $6.5 trillion. $6.5 trillion, and that was in 2015. Now fast forward to the present time. In 2017 and now 2018, that number has jumped up to $21 trillion. And that is not just some kind of crazy made-up conspiracy number that people threw out there. It's actually a very legitimate, well-researched number that this has been found to be. And there was a man who is a professor at Michigan State University. His name was Mark Skidmore. When he found out that the Inspector General report of 2015 stated that the U.S. Army fudged its accounts by $6.5 trillion, he actually assembled a team of undergrad students beneath him, and they had the assistance of some former government officials and some other people, and they went into a whole prolonged study. It took them months to go through various accounts and to actually study this, and they found that it wasn't 6.5 trillion, that yes, it was $21 trillion. So I would like to know where that money went to, and further along in this presentation, we'll gather as to what some of that money did go to. And it also goes to note right here that that is just money that was taken out of the Defense Department that was found missing through the DoD, through one branch of government. It also goes to note that the top two agencies in 2017 it was found where money was missing was the DoD and also the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So in 2017 it was found through HUD, through the Department of Housing and Urban Development, that there was $500 billion missing, and that was also uncovered in an Inspector General report. So we could be talking about numbers even beyond $21 trillion if we begin to look at every branch of government. And it also goes to note that there has never been an audit of the Defense Department before. I don't necessarily know about the other branches of government, but if the Defense Department has never been audited before, we can then make an educated guess as to, well, there probably have been either no audits or very crooked audits done on the other branches of government in throughout history. So I would really like to know what that actual number is. And like I just mentioned, there's never been an audit of the Defense Department done previously until now. So in 2018, the Pentagon is actually announcing the very first ever audit of the Department of Defense. And just in the first couple weeks of the Pentagon admitting that they are conducting their first ever audit, they found that the Pentagon failed to properly keep track of nearly $1 billion in projects. And this particular project only had to do with helicopters. They actually found $800 million in helicopters, money that was said to be gone to that, missing. So, and this is only in the very first couple weeks. We haven't even really ramped up this audit of the Pentagon because it's taking thousands of men, it's taking hundreds of millions of dollars to conduct, and they're just in the beginning stages of it. So as I see this happening, what I think is going to occur is that we're going to get a slow rollout of where this money is gone. Of course, they can't go out and on the public record instantly say there's $20 trillion missing, because would people believe that? Would that might shock a lot of people as well. So it has to be a very slow rollout of information pertaining to the $20 trillion plus and where that money has gone. But we're beginning to see that. This was only admitted, the $1 billion in missing helicopters, just about a couple months ago. I think it was late February that this was admitted. So we're going to see, I believe, throughout this year of 2018, more and more information come out detailing where exactly this money has gone to. And it also goes to note that the Inspector General's office looks to be a very crucial part in the alliance, in these white hat groups, the alliance, if you will, for lack of a better term, exposing and taking down this deep state cabal. So we have a lot of information coming out of the Inspector General's office, not only within the last few months, but within the last couple of years even, detailing a lot of information in regards to government corruption, missing money, politicized government agencies, FBI corruption. A lot of stuff is coming out of the Inspector General's offices. So it'd be very good idea to keep a keen eye as to what information is coming out about them and what they are exposing. So now let's get into talking about one aspect of where much of this money and much of these resources have gone to, and that is deep underground military bases, otherwise termed as DUMBs. So I'm going to reference a quote right here from the Deputy Director of Engineering and Construction for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, former Deputy Director of Engineering and Construction. His name was Lloyd A. Dusha, or Dushka, if I'm getting that correctly. But anyway, in 1987, in a speech of his, he actually admitted some very interesting things that shed some light on the topic of deep underground military bases. So he said, after World War II, political and economic factors changed the underground construction picture and caused a renewed interest to, quote, think underground. Of course, the weapons after World War II, there was research going into nuclear weapon technology and such. And what they wanted to do was then, of course, protect themselves. So they looked to go underground and build bases out there. Then he says, as a result of this interest, the Corps of Engineers became involved in the design and construction of some very complex and interesting military projects. Although the conference program indicates the topic to be underground facilities for defense, experience, and lessons, I'm assuming that means the conference that he was speaking at, he said he must deviate a little because several of the most interesting facilities that have been designed and constructed by the Corps are classified. And then in his speech, he went on to discuss the Corps' involvement in the construction of the large and elaborate NORAD base beneath Cheyenne Mountain in the 1960s in Colorado. And this was just a public statement. Now, this is probably the most significant public admission of secret underground bases there is. And we get into a lot of more esoteric, a lot more hidden public statements in this presentation here, but this is the one from a man who is actually working for the Army Corps of Engineers in a very prominent position, admitting that there are classified underground military bases. So if this is just admitted on the public domain, what is unacknowledged? What kind of technology and construction have they done in deep black military programs? And from what we hear from the testimony of insiders, whistleblowers, and disseminators of inside information, the technology that they actually have puts things like Hyperloop to shame and would really blow the minds of normal people in how deep underground and how expansive it's really gone. And when talking about deep underground military bases, the work of Phil Schneider needs to be addressed. So Phil Schneider was a man who worked for the U.S. government as a geologist and engineer, and he was blowing the whistle in the 1980s and the 1990s about his work in creating deep underground military bases for the government. And according to his testimony, he worked for 17 years for the U.S. government as an engineer and geologist, and he co-invented a technology that was extremely useful in building these deep underground military bases. And he said that he helped construct 13 of them and some of the tunnels that connected the bases. And the technology that he co-invented, he called laser rock deflagration. If I'm saying that correctly, deflagration, which means the rock is literally melted or powdered by a special maser-laser combination. And then the residue of the rock underneath is applied as a coating, kind of like an instant agate, which is amazing when you think about it, because what this allows them to do is to tunnel and bore at a much faster rate than any of the technologies that we see in the public domain. So as the rock is literally melted, it's coated around wherever they're digging into as essentially an agate, as a rock that is going to keep the tunnel secure and structurally sound. So this allows them to dig, I mean, we could think possibly even miles a day, if not more than that, much more than just a few hundred meters, as most people think the best technology available can actually bore and tunnel. And he worked for 11 years of the 17 years in government at Nellis Air Force Base, at Area 51 in the accompanying S4 base, and then also at Groom Lake. And he was found dead in 1996 in his apartment because he wasn't heard from for a couple weeks, so friends and families went to go check on him, and they found him dead there in his apartment. And this was only a couple months after a public speech that he did where this photo right here is taken from. So I think we could term that as being another mysterious death, murder, assassination, if you will, to prevent the release of information and knowledge about these unacknowledged programs. And Phil Schneider actually mentioned that there are at least 130 deep underground military bases just in America. And then he said the total number of worldwide bases could be anywhere from 14 to 1,500, if not more than that, to the best of his knowledge. And this was just back in the early to mid 1990s. So you can only imagine, with that number of missing money being taken from the Defense Department and the advances in technologies, we could very well have many more underground bases and many more expansive ones than just that number. And then I want to read a very interesting passage here from one of Phil Schneider's presentations he gave, because there's a very, this actually gives a very clear picture as to what could be housed underground, because it's not only humans that are in deep underground military bases, but we could have non-terrestrial species operating and experimenting there as well. So right here, he claimed to be in a firefight in 1979 while working in the Dulce underground base in New Mexico. And he is quoted as saying, "I was involved in building an addition to the deep underground military base at Dulce, which is probably the deepest base. It goes down 7 levels and over 2.5 miles. And this was him saying that, again, remember, in 1990 or around that time frame. At this particular time, we had drilled 4 distinct holes in the desert, and we were going to link them together and blow out large sections at a time. My job was to go down the holes and check the rock samples, recommend the explosives to deal with the particular rock, and as I was headed down there, we found ourselves amidst a large cavern that was full of extraterrestrials, otherwise known as large grays. So these were the particular ETs that were in this underground base that they blasted into. They didn't know it was there. They blasted into it, and then they found these large gray extraterrestrials. He shot 2 of them, and at that time, there were 30 people down there. About 40 more came down, and after this started, all of them got killed. Phil Schneider himself got hit with a directed energy weapon. There's actually pictures, and in his talks, he showed the scar on his chest where he got hit by it, and he showed some missing fingers he had from that particular firefight as well. So he was able to get out of there, but a lot of the people that came down after him that participated in that Dulce firefight, as it's so called, they were all killed. And he says, we had surprised a whole underground base of existed aliens, and later we found out that they had been living on our planet for a long time, perhaps even millions of years, and this could explain a lot of what is behind the theory of ancient astronauts. So that particular passage I wanted to make known because it sheds light on a few different issues. A, that there have been extraterrestrials here for a long, long time in secret, whether they're just observing or experimenting or whatever the case is. And this also shows you the amount of construction they were doing with these deep underground military bases. So they were going 3 miles down, blowing out large sections to continue expanding, and then they stumbled upon these extraterrestrials. So Phil Schneider definitely is a great resource when trying to understand what's really going on in deep underground military bases. And not only are these military bases underground, but they can also be underwater. So underwater bases is another dimension to this deep underground military base issue. And actually we can reference documents out of Stanford from the 1960s that describe the strategic advantage of what they called in-bottom bases. So in 1968, the Stanford Research Institute discussed the feasibility to construct dozens of undersea bases in a study entitled The Feasibility of Manned, what they called in-bottom bases. And then in 1969, William B. McLean, who is the former technical director of China Lake Naval Ordnance Test Center and the U.S. Naval Undersea Warfare Center, made comments to a man named John Neubauer, who is the editor-in-chief of a magazine entitled Astronautics and Aeronautics. So basically, the former technical directors of these large naval institutions admitted to a man that was the editor-in-chief of a newspaper or a magazine, and in an interview, he stated that underwater bases are already in development. And that interview was called A Bedrock View of Ocean Engineering. So in 1968, out of Stanford, we have a study admitted called the feasibility of manned in-bottom bases. And then just a year later, we have a very prominent man who used to work for the Navy who admitted that many of these are already in construction. And then according to Phil Schneider, he actually mentioned that undersea bases actually already exist off of the Atlantic and Pacific coastal shelves in very strategic locations. So there's a lot of evidence out there to show us that deep underground military bases don't just exist under our feet in many different places around America, especially to the west. I'll show you a map here in a minute, but they could even exist off the coast. And in this picture right here on this slide, this is actually a screenshot from Google Earth. And there is a very peculiar anomaly you can see right here that was found on Google Earth. This is off the coast of California, right off the coast of Malibu. And you can see this, what looks to be an underground base, an underground entrance to something. We don't exactly know what. Don't exactly know if this is a real photograph or not, but it is very peculiar that this would show up on Google Earth. So was this kind of a soft disclosure, a seeding of the public consciousness, or just a fake piece of disinformation used to discredit? Don't necessarily know, but based on what we know about underwater bases and what has been admitted about them, it's just an interesting dot to put into the picture, an interesting piece of the puzzle that's out there. Now let's talk a little bit more about under ocean bases, and we'll discuss the research of a man who's probably one of the most prominent researchers and authors on the phenomenon of deep underground military bases, and his name is Dr. Richard Sauder. So one of the foremost researchers on clandestine underground activities is this man, and a book of his is called Hidden in Plain Sight: Beyond the X-Files. It was published in 2012, and he goes through a wonderful list of researchers and people who actually gave him testimony about their experiences with underground and undersea bases. And one man who contacted Dr. Richard Sauder was a man named Walter Koerschner. And Walter Koerschner actually gave Dr. Richard Sauder some illustrations that he made for Dr. Sauder's book. This is one of the illustrations right here, because Walter Koerschner was an illustrator for the United States Navy. And he was an illustrator during the 1960s, and this is a picture he was actually tasked to illustrate. He was specifically tasked to make plans for a very technically complex and large manned base buried underneath the ocean floor that actually had releases to the outside world. And that release would be just a very small kind of opening where you'd be able to get in from, say, a mountainside or whatnot. But this base would extend out to underneath the ocean, and it would be a massive base. You can see the picture here. It's actually tasked for submarines, at least. You can see 3 different submarines that are docked within this under ocean base. And if you take the size of a submarine into account, these things are hundreds and hundreds of feet long. So if this particular base that he illustrated was to hold 3 or 4 submarines potentially, you can just imagine this expansiveness, the size of it. This particular base would be at least half a mile long, if not a mile long, by the same amount wide. And in this particular illustration, he actually was tasked to construct or to design 2 bases. So it actually has a sister base you can see up top in that photograph here. And this is what he called the Nautilus concept. It can dock 3 submarines at a time with an adjoining sister facility. And he said the picture is virtually self-explanatory. So a base like this can hold hundreds of sailors, hundreds of personnel, and multiple submarines. And keep in mind, this was just an illustration that he made for projects in the public domain. Again, how expansive is this on the unacknowledged or the deep black level? How much has really been built out under our feet and under our oceans with trillions of dollars and many different classified patents? I think that's a very good question. So let's talk about now the list of known and supposed base locations. We're going to reference a picture here that allegedly comes from a leaked Majestic 12 document, a leaked document from the National Security Council. But when taking this supposed real picture and comparing that with the testimony that we get from Phil Schneider and many other people, this seems to be very legitimate as to seeing where these deep underground bases could very well be. So just a few of them I have dotted right here. Of course, we have Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico. That was where Emery Smith worked out and was taken into a deep underground military base there. We have Dulce, New Mexico. We know that one from the testimony of Phil Schneider. We have Area 51 and of course S4. S4 is about 10 to 12 miles away from Area 51, but that's where it said a lot more of the secretive stuff is done. Area 51 is kind of used as like the smoke screen they give to the public to distract them while all the good stuff goes on at S4. But it's been said that both of those locations, Area 51 and S4, have stuff underneath them. We have China Lake. We have Denver International Airport. This one's, of course, very well known and a very weird area. And it's been said that there are things underground, an underground base below the Denver International Airport. And then we have the Wasatch Mountains in Utah. And we know that the Wasatch Mountains in Utah has an underground base because that comes from the testimony of William Tompkins. So according to testimony of Navy Secret Space Program insider, disseminator William Tompkins, he actually stated that the spacecraft that he designed in the 1950s actually went on to be built in the Wasatch Mountains in Utah in the 1980s. And these are the craft that we could term as the Naval Secret Space Program Solar Warden craft. Tompkins actually said that they were built in the Wasatch Mountains in Utah in the 1980s. And then, of course, we have other craft that can very well be kept in underground bases. So spacecraft, it might seem counterintuitive at first that, well, why would spacecraft be kept in underground bases and how would they get there? But actually a lot of the construction and housing for these spacecraft are in deep underground bases. So let's answer that question. Let's actually discuss how these craft are able to get in and out of underground or under ocean bases. And to answer that question, we delve into the actual physics or the science behind how these craft operate. So these craft not only have anti-gravity or electrogravitic, countering gravity with electricity to create propulsion, but they actually have mass cancellation abilities. So these craft, based upon the technologies that's on board them, the electromagnetic technologies, they can actually cancel their mass and then dematerialize. So these craft dematerialize and they can rematerialize in another place. So it's not a linear travel that these craft are going through. They can actually, I mean, if there's a base within a mountain, they don't even pass through the mountain. They just dematerialize from outside, rematerialize in there, and then that's how the craft is able to get in the deep underground bases. So when you understand this, then you can kind of gather how all of this stuff goes on, how actually these craft operate, where they're kept, why they're kept there. Of course, they're kept underground because anything on the ground or kept out in space is going to be seen. So they want to keep all of this underground. And then, well, that's of course where a lot of this money goes into, not only the deep underground military bases, but the weapons platforms and the craft themselves. So not only do we have, like William Tompkins said, Navy craft that were built under the Wasatch Mountains, but then we have the Black Triangles, the TR-3Bs, and these could very well be kept in multiple places around America. One particular place that it's been said, and there's evidence that we have TR-3B craft kept, is MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa Bay, Florida. We have some photographs recently that have been taken of Black Triangles over and MacDill Air Force Base. That could be one place they're kept. Of course, MacDill Air Force Base is where U.S. Special Operations Command is headquartered, so that would very well be a central location that they would create a deep underground base and hold stuff there. But then, of course, Dulce, S4, a lot of these other Air Force bases like Edwards Air Force Base and whatnot. I wonder what's beneath Wright-Patterson in Ohio. A lot of these craft can be kept below ground at these locations. And of course, they could have their weapon system, the directed energy weapons, located and developed below ground here as well. And also what's kept in underground bases is genetic projects. Not just genetic projects, but projects and programs that they would not be able to do on the surface or even if a building was sectioned off and kept classified, it would still be difficult and very sensitive, not a very good idea for them to keep some of these projects above ground. So they do them in below ground military bases. They can have a direct hand in who gets in, who gets out, what's taken in, what's taken out. If the only access to this deep underground military base is one particular tunnel, so they can create a very effective shroud of secrecy for things that go on in deep underground military bases. And the genetic experimentation projects can be done. Of course, human DNA is a very sought after DNA from various extraterrestrial races and cosmic civilizations. We have a very peculiar DNA. So experimentation with human DNA, animal DNA, of course, extraterrestrial DNA can go on in deep underground military bases, and the hybridization of all the different DNA. So if they want to do some experimentation with beings and DNA that, of course, they would not want above ground, various people wouldn't be happy with them doing, they'll just do it in a deep underground military base. And very last thing I want to make a note of here is seed vaults and living quarters. So the idea of deep underground military bases being built out for living quarters for the elite is one that also needs to be known. So you can see this article by Zero Hedge here, and even CNN reporting on it, mainstream media. Why are so many among the elite building luxury bunkers in preparation for an imminent apocalypse? So on public record, we have massive underground structures being built as communities. We have a $300 million underground living community that's been built out recently in Texas. Again, on public record, don't know what's been privatized or built out secretly, but many of the powers in control are moving to different places, not only in this country, but internationally. A lot of them are moving to New Zealand. A lot of them are buying property in the West or out in remote locations. And I would imagine they are building underground bases for whether it's things they know about that we don't, or whether it's just to hide from an impending public that might know of their crime soon and want to go looking for them. Whatever the case is, the elite are definitely building out very large underground locations where they can go and hide or escape in an attempt to protect themselves from whatever might be going on the surface of the planet. So there you go. There's a lot of research and information on invention secrecy, how it's kept secret, what kind of resources go into these programs along with those secret patents, those secret technologies, and what's been built out below our feet. So now we're going to move into the interview with Emery Smith that we'll play, and then after that we'll be conducting a live Q&A with Emery Smith. So sit tight and hope you enjoy.
Hi, my name's Emery Smith. I'm 46 years old. I was in the United States Air Force for 5.5 years, active duty, and reserve for 2 years and inactive for another 2 years. And in and out of different types of projects as a civilian after that, because of my clearance and because of the job I held with them and other corporations that were funded by the government. I joined the military when I was 18 years old. I was in auxiliary of the Air Force when I was 13, and also was in Army ROTC before that. I was in the military for about 5.5 years active duty. I did another 2.5 years of reserve, and then another 2 years of inactive. And that's kind of how I got started with the United States Air Force, and also these compartmentalized projects, moonlighting in the evenings while being active duty and working for these underground labs that were owned by major corporations that were renting and leasing places on the base to do this type of work. And a lot of these were, of course, underground facilities. It was mostly tissue specimen examination and dissecting and taking parts of specimens. And I've done over 3,000 different specimens, not whole bodies, but just different parts of body tissues and whatnot to send for testing. They were testing everything. I wasn't really allowed to, in the early years, know anything about what I was dissecting. All I know is I had to go in there, take this part of this tissue, or dissect this nerve, or take this blood sample from this this specimen, and then send it away for testing. The technology I witnessed in the programs that were suppressive, that were suppressed still to this day, are things like anti-gravity, zero-point energy, a lot of 3D holographic imaging. Of course, there's a lot of devices that were reverse engineered by these corporations from government-retrieved downcraft and extraterrestrial DNA, along with hybrid DNA from these specimens that they use to make pharmaceuticals and to make cures with, and things like that. So there's always a positive and negative. They might make a gun with one thing, but the same device is used to kill cancer, on a different wavelength, but the same technology. So these things are all suppressed. So we don't have to live like we do now. We could actually have a lot of abundance as far as medical technologies, the cures for diseases, the abundance of water and food for everyone, and housing if these technologies were released, and of course energy, free energy for everyone, and for all of our devices, so we wouldn't have to rely on gas, coal, and oil. I witnessed many different craft in these projects. I was actually working with the bodies and the craft because they're connected. A lot of the craft are organic material consciousness-assisted technology, which means only the driver or that race can actually operate the vehicle due to their frequency of the genetic DNA and the frequency that they're emitting. It's kind of like having a pet or a car that only responds to the owner. And these types of vehicles are so amazing. They're usually made in space through harmonics and frequency. So they can actually give life to a craft and infuse it with artificial intelligence or consciousness, or both, and match it to the driver or the occupants of this vehicle. Some of these craft were many different types of shapes. Of course, there's always the classic spheres, egg shapes, and the disc shapes. But there's also other craft that are interdimensional that can change shape. So they might come in the form of light, and they can manifest and change their atomic structure to become solid. So these types of crafts are a little bit more advanced, than the crafts that we hear about in pop culture, you see on TV and whatnot. These crafts can actually go interdimensional. They can change shape with all the occupants not even knowing it's happening, and then reform again in different worlds and different dimensions and different parts of the universe immediately. So there's not a down lag time, because they have their own atmosphere, they have their own gravity, they have their own little space that they have projected, from this craft that keeps them completely encapsulated with it. And they have already mastered teletransportation and all these things, so the bodies can shrink with the craft in its own living space. And that's why they can go 1,000,000 miles an hour and make a right-hand turn, because they don't feel it, because they're in their own, kind of like their own dimensional holographic world, where they have to fall under those scientific algorithms, such as like in the 3D here. As soon as they make themselves 3D, they have to survive in a 3D. So they have to maybe take a step down if they're from the 4D, 5D, 6D. So it's really interesting how these craft that we have had for many, many, many years, some have been there for over 30, 40 years, and some craft are very new. And we get different craft all the time. Like I said, one of them that I explained one time looked like an upside down Jell-O cake. And it actually, you could touch it and it felt like a memory foam mattress and had a hollow inside. This was about 40 feet in diameter, 50 feet in diameter, and it had like a 10 to 25 foot hollow inside to this, to this craft. And the craft was not hollow, it was solid. But for some reason, inside this opening inside the cylinder, the cylindrical, opening were where the beings actually were. And it's open, but when it activates, there's a floor appears and it forms. So, but they don't really use floors, they don't use chairs, they're just kind of there. And it's a very interesting, it's a different thing. It's not like about a lot of buttons. There's no steering wheels or cockpit like everyone thinks there is when you walk in these. They're very seamless, and they give off energy all the time, even when they've been captured and taken down for 30 years. They still emit this amazing energy that they're harvesting from within inner space. It's a really, and that's what they're trying to figure out now, is how to harvest that. And a lot of them have, figured this out, but there's a lot of corporations that are, fighting actually for this technology. But we're way advanced, more than you think, a few thousand years than anyone would think, humans here right now. But that's, that's what's being repressed, this type of technology. Our taxes around the world, from the U.S. government, when, they're charging $100 for a hammer, and it only costs them $5 to get. So all this extra money, trillions and trillions of dollars, are going into these black projects to fund them, along with what they're doing in space, as far as working with other humans and extraterrestrials, with trading and whatnot. And I'm not familiar exactly what they're trading, but there is something going on with that. But mostly it comes from here. Extraterrestrials, don't really care about gold or money or cash. So kind of like when you're working in the government and these projects and the military, everything's done by favors, and it is kind of a favor thing, or an even exchange of something for something. Like when I was working with the projects in New Mexico, we stumbled upon something, we couldn't figure it out, whether it was an extraterrestrial device or a craft. So we would call the other bases. We would call over in Australia, we would call, Italy, we would call, England. We would call these places and say, hey, do you have anything like this that you could help us figure out to get to work? Because we come on these, we stumble upon things and we have to stop. And then if we can't figure it out ourselves, we'll start asking around. And for that, we have to give them something they don't know that we have. So it's this exchange and bargaining system of, give me a little information and I'll give you information, Overnight, if we were able to get all these technologies together and give them to the public, it would, end gas, coal, and oil. Because you prove ETs exist, first thing the scientists are going to say, well, how did they get here? They didn't get here in rocket fuel coming from 1,000,000 light years away. So how did they do it? Well, they're making their own energy. Okay, they're getting the energy from the vacuum of space. It's unlimited energy. It's right here, right now. I can just open it, grab it, and use it with, the right technology. That technology being released also affects everything that we do here, such as getting water from the atmosphere, just making it, appearing in your glass, purified water. So things like that, which, we talk about water and food. Well, there's a lot of countries, believe it or not, on the planet that don't have a lot of fresh water and food. Just look at India, okay? All their wells are completely destroyed from lead and arsenic. It's 2.5 billion people over there. It's like a third of the planet, and just in India. So these people, really need some clean water out there, because the ground's completely destroyed. So the technologies that come with this could clean that up. It could clean up the big mess that's in the Pacific Ocean, all that garbage floating around miles and miles and miles. Fukushima, radiation, this type of technology can also clean that up within a couple of days, and transmute all that negative energy and all that trash. Cancers, disease, all that stuff could be, cured in just a couple of days with a couple of treatments using frequency and light from some of these projects. So life would be a lot easier if we didn't have to work so much to pay our gas, coal, and oil bills, and focus our energies in things we'd like to do, and also expand our consciousness. The people that are keeping these technologies from us are referred to as the Cabal, Majestic 12, the 300 major corporations that run the planet. So these are some of the pop culture terms that people use, to define, well, who's actually, making me, pay taxes, and who's making me, pay my electric bill, and this gas keeps going up and down, and the pricing and prices and stuff of all these negative things that we really don't need. I mean, look at us now. We're still Elon Musk and SpaceX and NASA is still using rocket propelled technology that was probably invented by the Chinese on the first bottle rocket firework. So I mean, we're talking hundreds of years of the same thing, just trying to improve it, make it better, when there's already anti-grav there. But they only use it not for the public. They use it behind the scenes for the secret space programs to advance these secret space programs and keep it from the people of Earth and keep us stunted down here like slaves. I get the question all the time is, how is humanity going to expose these criminals? And the answer for that is very simple. Humanity won't have to. Gaia, planet Earth, will do it for us. Such as what's going on in Antarctica right now. Huge meltdown. Craft everywhere. Craft are starting to stick out of the ice. It keeps warming. They only got a year left before someone's going to see a craft a couple miles long standing out of ice. And there's a lot of private satellites out there now. I can order one right now today for under $1 million, just for me, with 4K cameras everywhere. I have these, these connections, and a lot of other people can get these things. Not that I have one. But what I'm getting at is Gaia is going to be the one. It's not going to be one person. It's going to be a collective of many people from around the world that whistleblowers and just people of the light that are going to come forward and share information and put their foot down when things are going to get rough, and keep standing back up after they get hit down and keep moving forward, because that's the most important thing. And that's how, everyone becomes a hero, when people speak out and support people that are speaking out for the world. And once this, polar cap melts on both sides a little bit more, and all these civilizations start showing up out of nowhere, the government's going to have to, and the religious community is going to have to answer to these new findings. They're going to have to answer to the stuff that they found underneath the ice in Antarctica. They're going to have to answer to the city that they found under the Giza pyramids. They're going to have to answer to all these amazing things, Atlantis, off the coast of Cuba. And, here it is, these amazing stories, but the media and everything just keeps it hush-hush here. In other countries, it's kind of a little bit easier to talk about these things, and the media kind of now and then reports on it. And then it gets kind of, quieted down. And that's because the media is controlled by the cabal. So once that is severed too, that's going to help humanity feel safer to step forward and to talk, and more whistleblowers will come out. But the government, for the most part, and the military, the U.S. government and U.S. military, are sick of what's going on. 90% of them are just tired of it. And, they have families and they're sick too. And, a lot of these things are happening with a lot of extortion, a lot of, mind control devices are being implemented in, making people do crazy things. So this is bad, because then it makes it feel like our leaders are not competent. So there's a lot of this going on right now to manipulate us as the normal people down here, separated from political and corporations. And we're just like, what is going on? We have the cures, we have the energy systems, we have all this, but it's not being implemented. It's being hidden, suppressed. The issue that we have right now is that people all around the world are still being judgmental. They're not being open-minded enough to say, and some of them can't help it, it's not their fault. Maybe some are getting mind controlled too. But we can't be sitting here, on YouTube, filming, 13-year-olds chopping military soldiers' heads off and celebrating that, because that's a really kind of a low vibe consciousness. So until we learn to grow up, be more mature, and make the right decisions, everyone, including myself, that we have to, at that time, then look at it from a conscious perspective as a civilized, opinion or perspective, and say, okay, we're not being like we were, 10, 20, 30 years ago. We're not fighting anymore. We're not chopping each other's heads off. We're not fighting for gas, coal, and oil, And once people come together, and it might take some horrible natural disaster, as President Ronald Reagan once said, how funny it would be if we were attacked by an outside extraterrestrial threat, that all of our indifferences here on the planet would just fade away because we'd all have to work together against a common threat. I mean, the president said that. So here we are thinking, well, there might be a natural disaster that wipes out half of the, human beings on the planet, or there might be, Gaia might reach out and have a major earthquake and strike back because we're not treating her very well. We have factions and the cabal that has scalar infotmetry that can create huge hurricanes, earthquakes, tidal waves, and whatnot. So you have all these factors here against us. But long as every one person makes a change, for the better, and we start respecting each other, and we don't judge each other based on, our race or gender and religion, that things are going to get a lot better. But until we learn to get along here, the farthest we're going to get with this is just a ride in SpaceX's little first-class shuttle around the planet. So I wouldn't be thinking there's any moon trips anytime soon to go to the Hilton there on the moon yet. I've had many memorable extraterrestrial experiences, too many to count. And there are a few that did stick out, that stuck out in my memories that stay with me for a long time. And one of them was a visitation from some tall whites in a craft. And it was one of the first times I was actually physically next to these beings and was able to communicate telepathically and get downloaded a lot of information that was needed for me to disembark on this journey, which helped me tremendously. As far as the projects, it was always fascinating every year as you get higher security clearances to also see technologies and extraterrestrials working with humans that were actually was against their will at one time, and then seeing them, becoming a family and being happy that they're helping us because they feel really sad for us. So I think some of the things of working hand in hand with extraterrestrials in these underground laboratories and whatnot, and being part of these projects and seeing that, wow, they're kind of just like us. They're just a little bit more civilized and mature. And it was a really big gift for me because I picked up on a lot with their energy and a lot of their teachings and educational scientific stuff, which I was just fascinated with. And it was very addictive for me to go to work because I just wanted to know more and more. And where's this going? And why doesn't anyone know about this? And, it was later on that I figured, man, if this stuff got out, what a blessing it would be to change the world and, to help all the animals of the world and clean all the oceans and, to cure my family of cancer and all these things was just flying through my head. So I think, to answer that question, it was just working hand in hand with these extraterrestrials. It was a blessing. And also, having special moments where you actually get to communicate with an extraterrestrial now and then to upgrade you and to also learn different sciences that didn't exist here on planet Earth. Because I was working on zero-point energy devices and getting more into that and having zero-point energy devices that actually work, and threats started coming in, and I felt threatened enough that if I did not do something, that my life was going to end very abruptly and very quick. And my past, shows that with the amount of family members and friends I've lost in the last 10 years and lifetime that is correlated with, this type of thing. So I believe that I had to come forward because I needed to get this information out to the people before it's time to go. So I'm saying, yeah, it's time to go. Okay, but before I go, let me get something documented, and let's get, all the paperwork in and everything I could possibly have and give it to people like David Wilcock and Gaia TV and other people that are in this, that are working with me, in this fashion to secure it and to investigate it, and to, if something happens to me today, I'm going to be very happy and satisfied, and to know that, I've done my due diligence, and I have, I got this out here. Plus, a lot of my non-disclosure agreements just ended, not all of them, and I felt more comfortable talking about these types of things. And that was probably one of the main reasons that I've been just hanging out in the background, listening to the pop culture leaders here, and also the significantly renowned leaders in this field of consciousness, speak and talk and I can kind of get an idea of what level everyone's at. My life has been threatened significantly ever since I started opening labs that have to do with energy, creating energy from the vacuum of space, and other types of devices. I noticed at that time, and I was a very successful person. I had 21 corporations. I had many patents behind my name. I had unlimited amount of money and funds. And when I started putting my funds and money into these labs, that with these scientists that were developing all these amazing technologies, that's when I noticed they started interfering. And my life just started going downhill from there. And I knew, I caught on, but I thought I was kind of that's not going to happen to me. I'm doing this the right way, And the government told me one time, they brought me in, they said, you got to be careful. They said, you're protected, got your back, but you're not bulletproof. So think about that. So that meant for me, I don't need to be on any camera, and talking about that stuff, about the energy stuff. But after that, I started losing my companies. I had a lot of colleagues turn against me because of my belief systems. A lot of my business partners were very upset that I was doing, CSETI work, or I was, in documentaries talking about new technologies, extraterrestrials. So real quick, my life in that form, just because of who I was, and slowly coming out and coming forward over, many, many years, being an informant for David Wilcock for 10 years, and he wanted me way back then. I was like, no, it's just not time. Plus, people weren't ready for it back then, this type of, I needed everyone to get warmed up to my speed, so I'm glad like Corey Good is out there talking about this stuff. Greer's still talking about it. Wilcock's still talking about it. All these amazing people, that you see at these meetings are talking about, science and the physics behind it and trying to figure it out, and life experiences, which is important. And that laid the foundation for me to come along and say, you guys got it. You're all right. Good. Now let's go. Let's take it to the next level. And let me give you all my information. Hopefully that will, put in those pieces to that puzzle that we all been waiting for, because it's been hidden for way too long. And it is driving me crazy to go outside and sit in a car and start it and go anywhere when I know what's really out there and what I've been involved with, and I've flown in these devices. So it's just, what are we doing? Like, why do we have to have underground tunnels with freeways, or these other magnetic these other train systems and stuff? There's other ways to do it that's easier. We're still staying with the gas, is what I'm saying. And for people who have electric cars, I know what you're talking about, because everyone's like, well, I got this car, I got a Tesla, I have an electric hybrid. And I'm like, that's great. I said, where do you plug that into? And where's that energy come from? Most likely it's electric, gas, and coal, unless you're near a hydroelectric plant where you're charging your car. It'd be great if everyone had a waterfall in their backyard. Then we wouldn't need electric, right? Because that waterfall would just basically turn that little turbine over and over and over and over, and we have electricity forever. But not all of us have a waterfall in our backyard. So what I'm getting at is I just don't understand the whole battery concept, because you still need gas, coal, or oil to charge that battery. However, if you have something like a Bedini system, which one battery charges 50 batteries, well then, hey, that's different, because you could charge, with one Tesla car, you could charge 50 of them, you know? So these are things which make more sense to me, these energetic devices, because any way that you can decrease the use of gas, coal, and oil, which is poisoning the planet, it's poisoning the atmosphere, it's poisoning us and the animals of the planet and the oceans, then, you know, it'll clear up. It's going to clear up real quick, this atmosphere, once we stop that. And then there was Cirrus, the documentary, which pretty much everyone in that documentary, as far as the core team members, were, you know, heavily attacked, severely attacked at some point. Even our director, Armideep Kalika's father, was killed. And I know it's all speculation of, you know, why and who, but we had a very deep conversation with him before he took this contract job and said, you know, this is a very sensitive thing, so many changes will happen to you and some might not be good. And sure enough, you know, they blamed it on some white supremacist faction, but I can assure you it wasn't. It was a direct attack on his family to so he would leave the Cirrus movie, which he didn't. So thank goodness for that, because we wouldn't have a movie by then. So working in C-SETI too, it started getting, and the movie, Cirrus the documentary, they were definitely coming at us hard. I mean, I was actually jumped by 2 agents in my hotel room, was severely beaten and hospitalized, and there's, I was actually on the phone with someone that was warning me at that exact moment, there's a attack imminent on you, and a couple of the people in the higher echelon of C-SETI and with this movie. And I was, you know, like, oh, okay. Next thing you know, before I even put the phone down, I hear this ringing in my ear, and it was so excruciating. I just remember putting my head down, dropping the phone, and I look up, and what I see after this excruciating sound in my head is 2 agents, you know, 2 guys in suits, and they literally were beating the heck out of me, and I could not do anything. It was so bad I was hospitalized, and then I knew at that point, well, this is getting a little rough. And then I had many assassination attempts attacked on me, shot at, you know, on the highway, and just intimidation factors. You know, if they really wanted me dead, they would have already killed me. But, you know, in order to kill me, they have to get many signatures, I'll say, on that paper to have it done. Because if they killed the wrong person and they didn't use that person yet for the right thing, because there's, like I said, there's a good part. There's a lot of white hats in there that, you know, are trying to protect us. So when you're a scientist and you're targeted for these types of things, you know, what they do is they just go down and to the rough side of the city that you live in and try to hire like a drug addict user for like $1,000 to go wipe you out. If that doesn't work and they fail, then they look at the gangs in that area, which are very successful at taking people out or robbing you or making you get in a car accident. And if that doesn't work, then they'll find a hitman in that state that's really good. And if that doesn't work, then they call in the black ops guys that are for that corporation, private ops, you know, that work for private organizations, to come really, you know, make sure that the job's done. Now, if they can't make it look like a suicide or an assassination, then what they'll do is they'll get you in a really nice car accident. And that usually does the job, with also hitting you with electromagnetic pulse weapons to rupture your aorta and your brain and break bones, which they can do from a satellite. And they would just blame it on a car accident, you know. So even though it was a small car accident, like recently, when I was transporting this device from the lab to another part here in California, and you know, we had a guy come across right across the line. We're in Topanga Canyon. That road is very, very dangerous to begin with. And here is a person coming at me, crossing the line, and I'm looking at him. I'm like, oh, he just came around the turn too fast. He's going to just correct that, autocorrect that. And I'm like, no, he's not. I had enough time in my head to like 3 seconds. And I have a big wall here, rock wall. I can't go anywhere, maybe 3 feet. And then I saw him get directly in my lane and actually accelerate. And then I knew that this was going to hurt. So I just turned a little bit and he hit my front corner panel. It was very, very traumatic. It was a tragedy. And maybe he didn't know why he did it. He seemed like he didn't know why he did it. And, they can take over someone and just for a little bit to have them texting on the phone, not paying attention, or maybe have them apply, to the gas pedal a little bit. It's these little things that people think, oh, well, they would just come and take you out. No, they got to make it look natural. The assassination and killing has to be natural or look natural because they don't want, anyone to say that this was a hit or anything like that. So car accidents are a great way, for that to happen. Luckily, I was being protected and had a great car that was very strong at the time. And it protected me and saved me. So I'm very blessed for that. Had a concussion and some lacerations and, just was very sore for a couple of months, but, couldn't really do much. But I bounced back and everything was fine. Another way that they do is they'll try to make you sick, unhealthy. So you really have to be always healthy. You can't be messing around, putting really bad chemicals in your body because that gives them an opportunity to take advantage of you. You lower your field by putting bad things in your body, then they can just walk in and make you go do something really stupid, lay on some train tracks and you'll just get run over. So you have to be, really aware. And I got to the point where it was just too much. I had 3 different people following me, surveillancing me, 3 different organizations, and it was just getting old, all because of, they didn't want me to come out about Big Pharma. They didn't want me to come out about extraterrestrials. They didn't want me to come out about technology because a lot of people out there that are coming forward, there's not too much background to them. Me, I'm well established, have all my government papers, all my military papers. Everyone knows I'm credentialed to the max, overqualified. For a lot of these facilities, which I recently, a few years ago, was going back and forth, reapplying to see, what was going on with that. So, I think me coming forward is going to bring a lot of really wonderfully educated, very well-respected doctors and military personnel out, and that's another reason I came forward, is to initiate that and to show people, hey, it's not as bad as it seems. But it's all the way you look at it and how far you want to go with it. And a lot of the people that I know are already in their 70s and 80s, the people I worked with and worked under, and they're coming forward. So, this is a new thing. I mean, it's not on film yet. So we have multiple whistleblowers now that I've worked with that do want to come forward now since I came forward. And they, are making special arrangements right now for their life and for their family. Because that's how serious it is. They're actually preparing certain ways they're going to live and, how they're going to protect themselves just in case someone doesn't approve of them coming out. But the thing is, they're having the integrity and the love to come forward like I have and just give it to the people. And I thought the people weren't really going to be ready, for this. But since they've been prepped, all the way up into this with all these fascinating speakers, like Wilcock and Good, that they're ready. And I can't believe, when I look at my Facebook, all the responses and all the questions are so intelligent. It's fantastic to know that people are really doing their due diligence and listening to what I say and researching it and finding out, wow, there's definitely something to this, and it's going to get better because I have a plethora of information. As long as I'm breathing, I can, keep sharing with everyone. And that's what I'm going to do.
Cool. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and now we have Emery Smith here for our Q&A discussion phase. How you doing, Emery?
Good, Jordan. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, just for anybody out there who is not aware of you, your story, your background, how you got to being the insider or disseminator of research that you are, how did you get into all of this?
Well, I joined the military at an early age out of high school, and the Air Force had a bunch of programs going on. And I was basically a surgical technologist in there and a surgical first assistant, a paramedic. And I was attached to a air transportable hospital unit out of England Air Force Base, Louisiana, that we could be deployed anywhere in just a matter of 48 hours, fully operational hospital anywhere in the world. And so that's where I basically got my surgical experience. And then I had my commander come up to me from the hospital at Kirtland Air Force Base, and they were requesting if I wanted to do some extra moonlighting work, which is after hours. And it was not going to be part of my active duty. It was actually a civilian job. And this base, Kirtland Air Force Base, has another base on it called Sandia Labs. And Sandia Labs is like a base on its own. They do a lot of different testing there. Anything from biologics to rocket-propelled weapons, and all sorts of really interesting things go on there. And they're also connected with Los Alamos Labs, which is in Los Alamos, New Mexico. And they run and have a facility underground. And that facility is rented out by many major corporations that do many different types of things. And I got into a position there of doing some autopsy and tissue sampling of beings of not of Earth origin, is what we say.
Right.
And so that's kind of where I got into that. When I got out of the military, I did join up with the Centers for Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence for 7 years, and was vice president of that for a while. And I helped direct and produce Sirius, a documentary with Dr. Greer, of course. He was the main person in that whole event, and it turned out really well. And now we're working on other things. And I came forward just this past November through Gaia TV and through David Wilcock and Corey Good, as you know, and started telling everyone about my experiences, basically, of all the things that I've been through and all the different amazing technologies that's out there. I'm a scientist and an inventor by trade. I invented the first tabletop stem cell concentrator and the first tabletop platelet-rich plasma growth factor concentrator, and that's how I got kind of world-renowned. I had the first CME accredited course to train surgeons in how to use, make, and apply stem cells and platelet-rich plasma, and I started that in around 1998. Wow. And it's been a very successful corporation, which I'm slowly getting out of right now and venturing off into other new technologies, such as zero energy and things like that.
Zero energy. No energy there.
0 point energy.
0 point energy. Cool. That's awesome, man. So it sounds like you had all this experience within military and civilian projects. Then you ventured into trying to increase the consciousness, but more from the background. Because I know you were in Sirius, but you didn't. Of course, you didn't. Say anything
I wasn't
about
coming forward. Yeah, I didn't want to. I still was in the back burner, and people in Sirius at that time, and even in CSETI, I was not at that time wanting to come forward with that. Right. I just wanted to be a normal, regular person and see, what are civilians doing today to make contact, and what are their protocols? Because we have a different set of protocols in the military. And I was just curious, I'm not working for the CIA like people think. I'm not a double agent of something, just this guy who had quite an amazing experience, and wanted to share it with the world, because a lot of these technologies that are being suppressed are already here and available, including a lot of cures, from pharmaceuticals and things like that. And I just want all that to come out, and I want the government and the major corporations that run the world to step it up, and because there's too much death and destruction going on.
Absolutely.
And of course, I'm a big, love meditation. I love the whole bringing people together and going out under the stars and meditating and holding pujas and things like this, and contacting extraterrestrials.
So I've got a lot of questions from this conversation. I'm sure everybody else out there does as well. If you have any, actually go ahead and drop them in the comment box and we can get some interaction here. I want to talk to you about your ventures now, what you're doing, building, what devices you're building now, what ventures you're getting into. But I have a question before I ask that. What are the differences between the protocols of contacting ET life within the military and civilian life? Because you mentioned that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to really get into that because it's
Say
kind
what you
of.
can.
It's. I'll just say it's not very far off than what we're doing in the civilian world with close encounters of the fifth kind CE5s that Greer had invented, and it's very close to that. They use a lot more technology, which I don't like using frequencies and technologies to transmit the different types of thought sequencing into the universe and into the fabric of space and time. There's this morphogenic field you've heard about, and it's called many different things.
Right.
And that's just the pop culture term. Well, they have mastered how to tap into that and how to transmit messages and things into space.
Awesome.
Yes.
So basically, just using your own thought patterns to contact.
Right, and of course the civilians, what we do is we go out there and we all are thinking the same thing, and we all, come out of our bodies and picture where we're at on the planet at that time, and we keep going further and further into space, still visualizing and holding that thought and welcoming, extraterrestrials to please come if it's safe and effective for them to come. And usually it's not. So a lot of times they have to transdimensionally or using 3D holographic imaging come there to greet us and things like that. And you definitely see a lot of craft, as people know, when we do these things. And depending on the continuity of the collective that's there, we might have one person in a group of 30 or 50, but if they're really fearful, they don't want to induce any type of fear. So they'll just stay back for a couple days until everyone's kind of on the same thought process of the collectiveness of the group.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. So now let's talk about what you're getting into, and then we'll go into some questions. But what kind of technologies are you looking at developing now, inventing?
Well, we're looking at a lot of psychological, the big thing now is raising your IQ.
Right.
Biohackers.
Nootropics, things like that.
Big nootropics. I have one coming out, as you know. We just launched it just a few days ago. And this is going to be something that's going to be pretty mind-blowing because it doesn't only allow you to be a little smarter. It actually raises your consciousness a little bit. And it actually allows you to see into the future, sometimes 6 seconds to maybe a day or two, where it comes naturally. And we're all capable of doing this already. It's just we have a lot of markers in our brain that just are not turned on just yet. So by getting certain amounts of herbs and things like this in certain ratios, it's all organic, it's all vegan, very natural. You don't eat jitters or anything like that. And it allows you to enhance your zeta wave pattern, which is part of your delta wave pattern in your brain. Also enhances your alpha waves and beta waves. So all these things now, you're getting up-regulated, which has never been done before until now. And we have some of the greatest scientists on the planet that were working on this for quite a while, and that it was being used in the DoD for a number of times for special remote viewers, special astronauts and pilots and things like this. Because the problem was they were not staying focused on these long-term missions, and they were getting addicted to the pharmaceuticals that were using, like caffeine and Adderall and all these other drugs. So they wanted to come up with something, and they did. And they only, gave it to the elite, which is not cool. So that scientist has, come out and teamed up with me. So we made this new supplement, and you're going to see it out there. There's many different names it's going to go under, but just follow along, and you guys will definitely be impressed with that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So looking into, we'll call them nutraceuticals, supplements,
nutraceuticals.
Natural kinds of brain enhancers. Everybody's looking to increase their IQ, of course, their mental capacity. But what are you, anything in the realm of zero-point energy devices? Yeah,
we have a few of these zero-point energy devices that have been validated. One was just validated, the one I've been working on for 6 years was just validated in October by an independent contract it's very hard to validate these things. There's only a few different laboratories out there that are not something you can find in the yellow pages, if you know what I mean. And that are sometimes ex-government owned or civilian operated and of these government contractors. So we were able to show it was over Unity. And right after that, that evening of that day was I was in a head-on collision with a vehicle that came across the line and accelerated into us.
Wow.
Yeah, so it did get a lot of, there's definitely some things out there that, it's not the easiest thing to launch out and just give away, because when you start, stepping on the toes of the major oil corporations and gas, that's where they get all their money for their secret projects. We're not paying that electric bill every month. The thing is, what if I just gave this away to another, a third world country, and let them mass produce it, like China, and let it go and slip through their hands, and get it off my hands. It's not with me, so you can't find me. I'm going to have it in my backpack or anything. It's
FYI, anybody listening?
It's in a very very secluded secured area. And when we have another one and they work off of some of them that we are using right now that we've got able to work was the Bedini system.
Nice.
It's a coil system as well. And the other one I can't really get into because it's a little bit above the line of allowing people to know what it is just yet.
Right.
But we are going to bring it out to some symposiums that we're going to be at and conferences, and you're going to be able to see this thing work.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You're going to have some serious security at those conferences.
Yeah, when you turn those on, for some reason, they know exactly where it's at. And they know, the government knows I was working on it for a while.
Right.
And they just said, you can build it, Smith, but you can't sell it, and you can't hook it up to the grid.
Oh, man.
And you can't teach anyone how to make one. And we'll leave you alone. So there's a lot of people like me, these underground lab rats that have developed many of these. I know about 80 running systems right now. But the thing is, you got to respect it, and there's going to be a time that's going to come where they're going to allow us to use it.
Right.
And unfortunately, it'll probably come at a time where it's going to be needed because of a natural disaster or some cataclysmic event where power will go off somewhere in the world where we need it to sustain, and we won't be able to get it back up. And then this will be a time where we can probably bring this to the public and bring this to the government to save many lives.
Interesting. I always envision a pole shift. That
Yes.
might be the cataclysmic event, just pole shifts.
I think about that.
Our standard electrical systems here just fry, and man, how are we going to come back from that? Well,
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people there that rely on medical stuff to stay alive.
that's true too.
And those batteries don't last forever. I'll say that.
Yeah.
Even pharmaceuticals, diabetics, they need to be able to have their drugs to survive. Sometimes, not all drugs are bad. If I'm kind of against pharmaceuticals, but if I'm in a car accident or something, I'm hurting. Please
emergency
inject
medicine,
me
absolutely.
something,
Come get me. Yeah.
help me out. So there's places for it, but for the most part, it's misused and being abused around the world, and these things can be replaced with really natural supplements from Chinese medicine and homeopathic medicines and things like that.
Gotcha.
And they're moving that way, the American Medical Association and the FDA, into giving the patient a choice, which I wrote a 500-page report to them a few years ago saying, 80% of all pharmaceuticals, we have reactions to or we're allergic to. So every time, 80% of the time when a doctor writes a prescription, they're actually negligent. They don't know that.
Yeah.
But they have no choice. There isn't a choice. But what if we gave a patient a choice? And what if there was something else there that was more organic or, less harsh on the body with less reactions? So my thing was, telling them, what you could do is in Walgreens or these CVS or these, pharmaceutical places is have a whole apothecary set up in there. And instead of getting amoxicillin, maybe you'll get colloidal silver. But you get a choice to pick which one. And they wanted to kill me for coming up with that idea. But the good part is, I said, why? You could charge about 2% more than a real pharmaceutical. Ah, now everything's okay.
Now we're on the same page.
Oh,
Totally.
we know they can make money, you know?
Uh-huh.
So it's kind of like that. And it's going to slowly transition into that because there's going to be a lot more scientists out there who are going to find out pharmaceuticals are killing us.
Right.
And they're going to start, doing that. I was just the person to initiate that.
Awesome. So now I want to ask you a couple of the questions here. One of them, can you describe in greater detail your interactions with the tall whites that you referenced?
Yes, absolutely. I just shot something about that yesterday. The tall whites, there's many tall whites, by the way, of extraterrestrials. But
right.
The ones that I've actually worked with in the projects are very long, slender, tall beings with very small, thin faces. They kind of remind me of those extraterrestrials in the Star Wars movie that were making all those clones at one point. I hate to refer to movies like that, but I know there was some sort of planet that was making all these clones of one of the assassins there,
Okay.
and they were very tall, lean, white. There's also a recent movie called Valerian, I think, something like that. Yeah, Valerian, that also had these really tall, slender, 7-8 foot tall beings with very ectomorphic type body somatotypes, we call them, which are long, lean boned people. And they're amazingly loving and tender and incredibly smart. And in my projects, they had the ability to look at a body. It doesn't matter what species the body was, and they could somehow access the cerebral cortex of and the brain and see the last moments of these beings' lives to find out what the heck happened.
Or was that just through their consciousness? So they
they had to be within a certain distance,
right.
Very close, by the way. You don't have to touch it, but they were able to do this, and they did always have their hands near the head when they were doing this. So it was like very mind-blowing that they could reactivate, re-energize these memories, And I think they were doing a couple things. I think they're utilizing the morphogenic field and going back in time. And I think they were also getting that frequency of that body to trace it.
Right, like a DNA code or something to be able to...
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yep.
So did you get a bad feeling from these tall whites? Because like you said, there's a lot of different tall whites out there.
No, I've never had a bad feeling from them. You really actually increases your mood to be around them.
Interesting.
You could be having a bad day and just being near them. They're telepathic. They can speak. And a lot of them like to make the eye contact. And when they make the eye contact, then all the thoughts are interchanged and intermingled. Some people did not like to be around them, and that's because once you meet one, they kind of know everything about you from day one. So you can't have any secrets around them, that's for sure, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
And some people were a little awkward about being around them because they probably had some secrets they didn't want anyone to know.
Right. There you go. Next question, Emery, what do you know about starseed humans? What's your opinions on that?
Yeah, not too much. I don't really comment on that as much as I do with working with the extraterrestrials and the underground laboratories and things like that. But there is definitely, I believe, something to this. I'm just not educated enough behind that. I know many children being born at this time, and every year it's like you see them playing pianos at the age of 2 and becoming singers.
Kids are
just a genius level,
Yeah.
And it's just a beautiful thing to see this. And it's because of the energy that's shooting from the universe, constantly upgrading us. We're always getting upgraded,
right?
Sometimes we have help from extraterrestrials upgrading us from the depths of space in the universe. And others, it's just the universe accelerating into a new level of consciousness where the rest of that brain we have in there, the rest of the 98% of it, we'll be able to use.
That'd be fun.
That'd be good.
You're not going to develop a supplement to help with that?
I am.
You are?
Of course.
Oh, that's what that's is doing. Huh?
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So let's see here. Next question. This one's a good one. Do you have any information on the Rh negative blood types?
No.
Okay.
No comment on that.
No comment on that. So let's see here. Do you have any experiences like Corey or Niara did with suppressed memories? Is there anything you think you've been mind swiped with, or?
No,
Gotcha.
I don't. I've never had that experience that Corey's had. I have a lot of people that I know in the military and out of the military that have, so I believe in it. I just, I have not had that happen to me. That I'm aware of. That
you're aware of.
Yeah.
So everything is already right there.
And it can happen. These things, definitely can happen, and there's definitely devices that do this.
Gotcha.
And I've seen the projects and read some briefings on it, but I was not part of that.
Gotcha. Let's see here. A lot of questions. Or this is kind of a part two. Same question. We talked about the suppressed memories. Or are you aware that you have any kind of heightened psychic strength, precog, clairvoyance, empathetic abilities, or anything that you're aware of have been tested for?
Absolutely. I mean,
right.
I don't mind bragging about that. I'm very psychic. I have a very deep knowledge and feeling for everything. And I could turn it on, I could turn it off. If I really want to find out something, I will find out.
Right.
There's not too many things I can't find out. Not that I want to find out.
Yeah.
But
I kind of feel the same way sometimes.
I don't use it for anything malevolent or anything bad, or but I do utilize it every day in my life, and it's also a good security protective thing for my team and myself wherever we go.
Right.
So we have these abilities of telekinesis and telepathic communication, things like this that we've mastered.
So you could be a tall white sitting next to me reading my mind right now.
I don't need to be a tall white to do that.
Hey, you're a tall white guy. Yeah. That is good, though. I mean, you get these intuitive pings when you're out. You're like, this is just a bad situation, or this person just feels bad. Let's get out of here. Or something
right.
like that.
And I have, mastered that and enhanced that, of course, by being part of the projects and being a scientist and engineer, developing things to enhance my cognitive function. All my life, my team's been on a lot of cool things and supplements that we didn't have available that we had to come up with. And now we're going to share that with the public.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That'll be really helpful for everybody. In terms of energy devices, are you familiar with, it's called the Hans Kohler free energy device?
Yes. I'm aware of that.
Awesome.
But, yeah.
Somebody here just said they built a model but can't get it to work.
That happens a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not one person. So everyone knows it's like, well, one person to make a device like this, it's hard to do. There's usually a team, and there was over 300 people involved with this at one time for these devices that we were working in, secretly, and so it's a collective. And the more people that want to get involved with that, and there's different organizations out there you can join and learn this stuff. It really helps not to let's just say not to cut the wrong wire.
There you go.
Yeah.
Good way to put it.
A lot of eyes when we work on these. So we're streaming it. So we might have up to 300 people, watching us put things together and helping us. And there's a lot of people out there that want to help, and they're too scared to do it themselves. But you'd be surprised how many people would help from afar to,
right.
To make this happen for the world.
That's awesome. Let's see here. This is a really good question.
Okay.
That I think you'd be able to give some good advice on. Any advice for people trying to start a business that benefits humanity and the planet?
Yeah, that's an excellent thing. I had 21 corporations at one time, and all my inventions, I only invent things that will help the planet, the animals of the planet, and human beings, in that order. And I've been really successful with that. So I guess the best thing I can tell you is, whatever idea or dream you have, it can definitely, no matter how far-fetched you may think it is, you can do this. And there's always a way to figure it out. It might take an entire lifetime, or it might take just a couple of months, depending on what you're trying to do. But I am a firm believer in that, and I'm here I am. I've done it.
Right.
So I mean, it can be done. It's just don't think it's that difficult. Don't be scared of the licenses. Don't be scared of the corporations, just keep going, and that's what makes it, makes you special is, not how hard you can hit, it's that you're going to keep getting, getting
keep
up.
Hitting singles, keep hitting singles.
Yeah, that's right. You're going to keep hitting and keep getting up and keep going. And that's my whole philosophy.
Awesome. Good suggestions right there. Next one, have you had any experiences or any sort of contact with non-physical entities?
Oh, yes, of course. You know, a lot of these times, a lot of these beings are in the form of energy. I mean, most of the time they are.
Right.
And they can actually come into 3D. They can manifest into different things. And you know, that's a pretty broad question because entities could mean a lot of different things. You know, extraterrestrial, angelic, you know, what are you really looking to, you know, what kind of beings? But yeah, they're all made up of energy. Don't forget, we're all energy. And if we don't have this body, you know, we're still here energetically. You're everywhere all the time, all at once, with all these energies and these entities, you know, and you can share space with these entities.
Mm-hmm. So that means when you're inviting entities into your field, you want to, you know, set the positive intention. Make sure you're not inviting in any negative ones. What's your thoughts on Ormus? Any ideas on monatomic gold?
What do you want to know? Know all about it.
There you go.
I'll even plug one of my friends because I've tested Ormus from all around the world, from all the teachers and all of the, you know, nutraceutical corporations.
Mm-hmm.
Ormus is really important. Orbitally rearranged monatomic elements are so important because you are born with those minerals and these components, you know. And throughout life, there's nothing that you can eat or drink that has them in there.
Mm-hmm.
So I really am a firm believer of, you know, doing a teaspoon of that in some really good water every day and every morning because it helps keep the voltage up of the cells. It helps you let the body stay at a certain voltage that you can actually heal yourself, you know, with this type of stuff. The company that I use is called Blue Water Alchemy out of Crestone, Colorado. It's one of my favorite Ormuses. I just actually had another order placed. But it's an important thing, even if you're already healthy, because your voltage changes throughout the day. And that's because of all the harmful things around us, like the paint on the walls and these crazy lights blinding me right now.
And all these EMF waves and this Wi-Fi.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you want to keep that voltage up because your body is really smart. Humans are amazing creatures. And ETs think we are the superheroes of the universe. They look at us saying, look at all the crap they go through. And over, you know, millions of years, we get stronger. We live longer. You know, the body adapts to the stress and the different things that you're putting onto it, whether it be EMF fields, bad food, drugs, and all these things. And it actually toughens these bodies where some ETs can't even, you know, walk on Earth because of all these crazy fields that are going on. They have to have a protective, because they're so sensitive, you know. And what's interesting is these ETs that have come back from, you know, from the future have human DNA, Earth DNA in them. So you might have a 60% Arcturian, you know, and a 30% Pleiadian DNA, and another 10% from Earth human DNA. So that means over time, our species will travel amongst the stars and interbreed with other species. And a lot of the projects we worked on were hybridization of extraterrestrials and humans and plant life.
Interesting.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So what was it like? I mean, just hybridizing those DNA strands from like ETs, humans.
It's a very complicated, complex
I'm sure it is.
thing, you know. And for me to talk about that right now, we need a couple of years here, education-wise, to go through all that. But it's a difficult thing, and they have supercomputers and AI that helps, you know, get the splicing done. And they have, you know, pretty much mixed our DNA with pretty much every type of animal and insect and biological, anything biological, even as small as bacteria and viruses, to make, you know, all sorts of just insane, crazy things, such as, you know, making a stronger soldier, human, that can be mind controlled and programmed and be, you know, cloned.
Right.
So there's a lot of this weird science and you know, freaking magic going on below the ground that people don't really hear about too much until, you know, people come forward and talk about it. And I'm hoping that the teams that I worked with, and one of them just flew in, as you know, this weekend, and he's coming forward now, and more are coming forward to talk about the techniques and the hybridization of these creatures and what they use them for. And I don't know why they want to make so many. I'm not sure. Maybe they are trying to build a huge army, to do something with, and they can also grow these creatures and clone things very fast. Now we have 3D printed. We can 3D print an organ. We can 3D print a body.
In the projects or in the public?
In the projects.
In the projects.
In the projects,
Gotcha.
And that's slowly coming forward. And so it's going to be a really interesting next decade to see. We're going to have a huge spike in technology and life-saving things, and I'm looking forward to that, because when you start 3D printing bodies, you can start also getting involved with self-sustainability of creating water anywhere on the planet, creating food, so no one will ever have to starve on the planet anymore. There'll be 3D printing houses, which we're doing already. So in the future, there should be so much abundance that there should not be anyone sick, and we'll have enough food for the entire planet, and of course, clean, safe water.
Right. Have you witnessed any of the replicator technology?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Awesome.
absolutely.
Press a button, get a steak right there on the plate or something like
Yes. Yeah, that's right. They have walls that are completely mirrored, and you touch it, and it turns into a screen no matter where on the wall. And they're at, and then down the side of the wall, once you place your order, it actually prints the food, and it goes through either a heating element or a cooling device to get it to your, like you wanted a steak, you just said. It'll make it medium rare. And it prints the food in less than 3 minutes and can heat it up in less than 10.
Wow.
And then you go down the wall where we work, and there's a cubby hole. And there's a big, long, some of them are really big, 6 feet long, maybe by 2 feet, where, you would see this like in a cafeteria where you put your trays in. Well, this is the opposite. Your food's there. And you pick your food up and go to the table and sit down. The tables are interactive too.
Wow.
And, you can just put your hand on the table like this and rub it, and here comes a napkin. I mean, amazing stuff. Yeah.
Amazing. So let's see here. Here's one. This is a good question, actually. Have you been able to use or witness healing devices used on humans? And if so, are the people making them or something like that going to be able to come forward and share their devices with the public?
They are, and it's already been done. And, even my devices and my patents are, curing people around the world. And it's just what happens is you get harassed by the government and the pharmaceutical corporations. Sure. I mean, I've been threatened by them, I don't know how many more times. They did show up at my place many times. Jumping out of the car, flashing the MP5s, getting back in, just to get you all jittered up. It's just, it's shocking because you're not used to that. And when I got out of the military, started inventing things and designing things, all this stuff started, coming to be. And I just thought I was a kid with a great idea. I just invented something to help somebody. No, they don't want that. It's very suppressed, and many people, many inventors and scientists are killed, and physicians every year. Right now, there's this big epidemic of the holistic medicine physicians are being just wiped out across the United States. And it's because a lot of these physicians are on the boards of these major organizations talking about their new techniques and technologies, and they don't want that out because it's a disruptive medical device or a disruptive thing. And there are a lot of things that are coming out faster overseas, like in Russia, Scandinavia, and Europe, that are just amazing, like the Scannar device that's been out for many, 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 many years. But it's illegal in the United States to have a Scannar cosmetic device, and it looks like the thing you see on Star Trek where they wave it over you and it touches the body and sends in frequencies and whatnot, like the Rife, Rife does, But this is a handheld one, and all the astronauts were always issued one of these overseas. And over here, nope. And if you now they're trying to get them in, and you can order one, but customs gets it, it takes out the chip, and basically you just have an electrostimulator.
Wow.
And no one even knows until we see these and we look at it and we're like, it's been hacked.
Messed with, it's been tampered with. How do you think the Templars made it into the floating hollow rock chambers that you discussed on Cosmic?
Oh, hey, that's a great question. Very good question, because it was not at that time surrounded by the aquifer. Okay,
Gotcha.
that broke away, over a few, over 100, 100 and some years or whatever. It was quite a while ago. Yeah, so everyone's digging up these treasures, or trying to find these treasures, on Oak Island and all these misleading, disinformed places, and it's not over there. They sent out the Sinclairs sent out many ships to discombobulate, everyone, because all the gold was, and all those treasures were being taken out of Europe because of the religious, the Vatican, and I mean not the Vatican, but I don't want to talk about religion, but
right.
There was a religious faction taking over the whole European, the whole European place there, and so they wanted the kings, and queens wanted to get all their money out of France and all these places and try to hide it before the wars were coming, and we found it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Let's see. Now we're getting into some questions about the Atacama being as well, and you actually have a replica if you want to show it. I know you do.
Atacama being, what's that?
What's the being? What
is this guy?
Yeah, so he actually has a replica. This is not it. He would not be touching it and bare hands and whatnot. But this is a replica he had made. You can discuss it.
I don't know if they can see it. I don't know. There's a million cameras in
that
here.
one. These ones are yours.
Good. Okay.
Yep.
So what's going on is while I was over there collecting the DNA to bring back to Stanford, we took a lot of CAT scans and MRIs and things like that. And there's a secret base there in El Paso that does a lot of the 3D tissue printing, and had access to that. So we went over there, and I fed all the CAT scan information into the computer, and it made an exact duplicate,
wow,
of that. And that's exactly what it looks like. This is just a polycarbonate duplicated version of that. And then we had another special person, I won't say the name, that came forward, and they, just through the pictures, a very group of scientists, I think, over there in China, was really amazing, and they made another one, but not using the CAT scan, just by all the pictures we took, the 180 of all the pictures, and that's handmade.
That's handmade.
Isn't that amazing? Wow. That's not a mold. Amazing. And of course, they colored it to the exact same color that you see these pictures that I've taken all over the internet of this guy. So, we. Is
this wood?
No, it's a type of polycarbonate mix.
Yeah. Gotcha.
It's very heavy. Yeah.
Right, it does.
Yeah.
Woo.
Well, watch that guy. Man down.
All right.
Out of down.
Cool. Anything you're willing to discuss in regards to paper that was released, or any of the controversy surrounding it?
Yeah, I'm writing a paper right now to answer all those questions, and I'm going to release that to the public, my opinions and everything that's going on.
Gotcha.
And, the people of that project, you have to understand, they didn't do anything wrong. And there's many people on that project, as far as physicians. It was just not myself and Dr. Gary Nolan. There's 10 other physicians that are doing all the testing for this. So it's not just one person sitting here, And he did retest this stuff. People also don't understand, because I know that medical lingo can get kind of confusing reading that paper. And what had happened is he did test this not just once or twice, If I take, a piece of your DNA right now and I test it one time, it's going to tell me you're, 80, 90%, whatever. And I'll have to take another piece of your DNA. And that'll say, well, Jordan's 50% Arcturian, 50% human. That's the first one. The second one says you're 45% Arcturian, 55% human. So there's a little plus or minus going on. So people thought we just took like a couple of these and did it. We did that 55 times and then got the average.
Right.
And people are thinking, well, did they cherry pick something? Did they, so this stuff needs to be brought out. And I know Dr. Gary Nolan is ready to come out and do, come to the public and now answer these questions professionally to the scientists out there, because there's a lot of, things going on. Now, I'm not saying this, that, or the other right now, because I want to also educate the people, all the different corporations involved with this. So, so that's pretty much all I'm going to get into with that right now.
Interesting.
And it's a very dynamic, thing, and it's just so many people involved.
Right. So you're just saying the story's not done. Wait and see.
That's right.
Wait and see.
Yeah.
So let's see here. Good question as well. Do you think you could convince some of your friends or partners from the programs to join you at any of the disclosure events this year?
Yes.
So not just like this where we're streaming to an audience or whatnot, but venues in person.
Yes.
That'd be amazing.
That's what's going to happen here.
Cool.
That's why I really did come out, besides for my safety, is to get others to come out. And the more people that come out and tell these amazing, truthful, factual things that the governments are doing. And it's not always the government too. I just use that as a general term.
Right.
So don't think when I say government, it's like the United States Air Force. And people are like, well, he was in the Air Force. Say, what did the Air Force? Well, the Air Force didn't do nothing. They were just guarding a very right. Amazing underground facility.
We're talking about factions within factions.
Yeah,
and groups, so
and many corporations. Just because you see, the Trump Tower, well, there's a lot of rented offices in there by many different people.
Right.
And that's exactly what is happening in these underground bases. You'll have whole floors that have been rented out, huge laboratories and huge testing facilities. They're owned by someone else just a floor away.
Right.
So, you have to see. It's very complex. Exactly.
Totally. But all in all, yeah, it does sound like, because you mentioned one of your cohorts is deciding to speak out a little bit more. And any others?
Yeah, we're going to have a new show there on Gaia called Cosmic Science that I'm going to be coming forward with. I don't know how long it's going to run. I know I'm getting together with Corey Good. We're going to start doing some amazing streaming out of his facility, and also David Wilcock is getting his little place set up. So there's going to be a lot of other avenues where people will have a place to go that they feel comfortable, because they'll feel comfortable with myself. They'll feel comfortable with Corey. They'll feel comfortable with David. But they might not feel comfortable going to a corporation and filming something.
Totally.
Because they can turn it around. Someone can turn it around later. Don't forget, we can't always say what we want to say in some of these corporations when we're filming.
Editing can be a very helpful thing to craft a narrative.
And that's what I love about you, because here you're getting Emery Smith raw and unleashed.
Totally.
I can say whatever. You guys, I love this live. Nothing going on here. We can just say how it is, and in other places you can't.
Totally. So people love Cosmic Science. They're stoked for that. That's gonna be awesome. So that'll be a good, and you're actually going to get more into, of course, the science. Yeah, we're
talking about, right, exactly. We're going to talk about the science of how we communicate with ETs using technological devices.
Awesome.
We're going to talk about also how to do that through your consciousness and through your own body.
Fantastic.
And we're going to go over all the most amazing technological devices that have already been created to help cure people, to help create energy, and all these amazing, beautiful things that the Earth needs right now.
Man, it sounds like you're going to need security on staff there to talk about these things. But
I'll bring Raven.
There you go. So say even some of the science that you were delving into in regards, you mentioned the devices, free energy, concepts of like anti-gravity, things like that.
Yes, anti-gravity. We got to get away from these vehicles. I can't stand cars.
Seriously.
Especially with my luck.
We were watching watching you on the interview, and you every time you have to mention that we still drive cars, you get this fire in your eyes.
I just can't stand it. I think it's so crazy.
Right.
That here we are, still 100 years later, still putting fuel into vehicles and rockets and blasting around. Right. And it doesn't need to be like that, because that stuff was already invented in 1899. Anti-gravity, and it was all, Tesla Stubblefield already had the energy components to do all that. And they were, killed, and all their stuff was taken. And it doesn't need to be like that. There's many ways for transportation to be improved without having to use or build a giant tunnel underground and have these electric vehicles and trains going. Because where's that electric come from, by the way, guys? Coal and gas and oil. Okay, maybe a little bit of a wind farm, 5% or some solar.
But then still, with wind farms, you got to mine the metals for the giant propellers, and they're just ugly. And same thing with solar, you got to mine the metals for that. So really, how efficient are they?
Yeah. So this device, we did a test on it. It was great. We had a bunch of scientists meet us went to a Walmart parking lot, and because he had to. And it's always on the move, the device. It's never usually in one spot for too long.
True.
So we had a van, and people were already there, the scientists, and around midnight, it wasn't a 24-hour Walmart, around 11 o'clock midnight, all the lights went out in the parking lot. It was in a very small town that's not very crowded.
I'm glad the cops didn't show up.
Oh, I didn't finish.
Keep going.
So we, everyone was already there is what I'm getting at.
Right.
We met there first and pulled the van, pull up the little white van, you know, pulled it out, laid it on the ground. I told everyone to turn all their phones off and place it around the device, and then flip the switch, and bam, their phones all came on. All the lights in Walmart came on. We shut it off, picked the device up, put it in the van, and you know, everyone just, immediately left. You know, and there's more devices there to record certain energy things that were also there, but it was over within a minute. That's how fast we did it. And it was within 3 minutes, as one of our buddies was up there with the camera on the hill, that the entire place was full of suits, black vehicles, SUVs, within like 3 minutes after leaving. So they must have like underground places everywhere.
So you left. You got out of there.
Oh, we were already gone.
Okay, because yeah, you mentioned we got to do this quick, minute, done.
Bam.
You're out of there in the vans, and the SUVs.
Here's a circus show. There it goes. Okay, guys, take the recordings. Everyone knew what it was. Just to validate to some investors and other people that wanted to see this device.
Interesting. That's an interesting story. Let's see here. I think that's any more. If any of you have any more questions, go ahead and throw them below. But one thing I do want you to speak on is your productions coming soon as well.
Oh yes,
if you can.
Yeah,
cool.
we're going to be doing some. We're looking for some more investors and doing some crowdfunding. We did get a small investment in to start it. We are making an amazing movie, and the movie is going to be about. It's going to be like Charlie's Angels. You know, you have this Charlie guy behind the screen. He's telling the agents to do this, and you never know really who he is. And we have this well-known person, and that everyone knows, I won't say his name, that works with us, that gives us hints every now and then. When I say us, I mean my team. You know, I have another agent that works a lot with me for the past 8 years. That's going to be in this factual documentary. And it's going to be about what we have been doing, you know, the past, 5 years, that people don't really know what I do. You know, we get sent to these places to help decipher. Let's say we had a recent one where we had used an underground penetrating radar, and they had some interesting frequencies and blips come up that they didn't know what it was. So they called us in to not only remote view it and to verify, which we have 110% accuracy with the both of us doing it, and a 98 to 95% accuracy just by ourselves, but to also look at these pictures. And these scans are 400 times greater than a CAT scan. That's how the resolution is, and we can go ultimately any deep as we want with these special radars that they have. So, you know, here we are. We found a craft, you know, down there, and we found a couple acres of white gold and some interesting things. So we're going to take you on an adventure with us, with real GoPro cameras and everything strapped to us. And
got it ready.
And you got it right here. You'll come with us for sure. And we're going to go to a couple places. Antarctica. We're going to go to Chile. Because of the Ada being, and we're going to go to some other ancient cities and archaeological sites in Europe and Egypt, and you're going to come with me down into the catacombs. You're going to come with me down into these caves and see, you know, what we really do. And it's a very Indiana Jones-like Lara Croft movie. And we are really doing these things, you know, rappelling huge places to get to places and jumping out of helicopters. And this is, you know, kind of how our life has been. And we want to share that with the world, and also, you know, share with the people that are behind it, that are giving us these little secrets now and then, where we can find a being that's been left behind, or and things like that, including down there in Nazca, Peru, and stuff like that. We'll be going down there and taking you with us to show you some of the most amazing archaeological finds that you will not hear on CNN.
So, and your production is going to be a documentary, like first person point of view going down into
yeah,
it? And
I'm taking you with me, and it's all going to be filmed. And this is really real missions. This is not.
Right.
These are missions we already had scheduled and slated for. We just haven't done them. We're putting them for the movie. So I've taken a break this past year because of all the attacks. And as you know, as soon as the paper came out last Friday, the next day, someone else, collided with me at 55 miles an hour, took me out. So and I was hospitalized for that. So
we ride in separate cars.
Yeah, no one wants to ride with me for some reason. I completely understand that.
Yeah.
Unless it's my team, they like all the excitement and drama. Not
hey,
me.
I would too, man. Wouldn't mind. This is exciting right here.
Oh,
It's
gosh,
talk to you.
it's this nightmare.
Yeah. Couple last questions rolling in, and then I think we'll call it good for this one. Specify remote view, because you mentioned, do you use technology for that to assist you? Do you do it yourself? Do you have teams?
Yes.
So no technology.
No technology, strictly teams. The old school remote viewing that you guys all can read up online.
Yep.
And you've heard of all the old military teachers and whatnot. I won't say any names, but we've trained under these people, and I've been doing it since 1990. Actually, a little bit before that. And we have teams that we like. My team is all official remote viewers, and that means we get paid to remote view for huge contract jobs for corporations and the DoD and whatnot.
So it's a real thing?
It's a real thing.
Absolutely real thing. Remote viewers,
yeah.
contracted, and that's something that's actually fairly new to me. I knew remote viewing was taken very seriously by three-letter agencies, but to actually have contracts, and that's neat.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I haven't, just so you know, I haven't done any of that stuff this past
Throwing
year.
that out there.
But all my friends and the people on our team continually do all that stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm putting my energy now into getting the word out, and before something happens.
Cool.
And that's really what my goal is this past year and this coming year. I have so much to share with everyone. I just can't wait. I wish I could just have one big live stream.
I was thinking about that when you were mentioning those expeditions to Peru and Europe and whatnot. Live streaming that would be interesting.
I think that would be a great idea. I think that should be done, at least not all of it, of course, but most little parts where we can sit down and give you updates.
Exactly, like after the experience or something.
Yeah,
like that. You want to make sure something's there, not to break anybody's hearts. Like, oh, there was nothing there, and
right.
That'd be a bunk. But
no, we're always going to deliver. That's for sure.
That would be cool, for sure. And then last question here: what's the best way people can support you and your work?
Well, I really appreciate. I want to thank everyone for recently helping me out, because it's been really hard, guys. And very dangerous, and it's just a blessing to know that there's people out there that threw me $1 here and $1 there just so I could have a place to stay. I'm living out of a hotel. I have no vehicle. I am dead in the water, and I have a couple angels and a lot of people out there that have been just doing what they can to help me out so I can continue this work. I don't get paid for this work, so it's not something that's a job for me. I just need to get the information out as fast as I can, and it's all because of the viewers like you guys there that made this possible for me to do this stuff. And I have a PayPal account. It's Emery Smith 72 at PayPal. You can look me up, and you can just make the donation there. We are going to probably later on use some other formats, but this is the one that works great, the best for us, because we've been using it ever since my horrific accident last year. And I just want to thank you, and if you can please give anything, I promise we'll put it to good work and good use, and get you some really good more good data and stuff, because it takes a lot of money just to fly somewhere and have an interview with one of my colleagues that I need to have come forward, and just surviving right now, it's really hard. I just moved, of course everyone knows I just moved to Colorado here in Boulder, and looking for a small place to rent, but right now it's, I've been on the road pretty much the last 7 months with all the attacks and moving around in undisclosed locations. I did have a couple people provide some security for me temporarily, which really helped out a lot with the threats and things like that. So thank you ahead of time, and thank all of you who have helped me in the past. Can't say enough.
then I think one of the biggest ways to support is just simply spread the word, spread the message, get the information out there, get eyes on the stuff, and then, more people will come our way, everybody's way, to support us as well. So
Absolutely.
thank you guys. But from my heart as well, I've had a lot of support and help to get me where I'm at as well. And of course, Emery needs as much as he can get right now. So anyway, anything else you want to share with people out there? I think we covered.
Yeah, that's a great. Thanks for having me, Jordan, because I
Absolutely.
just love doing these shows with you because, like I said, I can talk freely.
Right.
And I know it's going to go live, and it's going to be right there for everyone to see and hear with no editing. And here we are. So thank you for that, and thank you all the viewers for helping Jordan out as well to make it possible, because it's people like him on this team that help me get the word out, because I don't have a camera. I'm not a big techie with live streaming and stuff. So people like you are really important to the collective to advance our consciousness and let people know out there of all these amazing things that are coming, and give hope to everyone, because you have to have hope.
Absolutely.
And that's why I'm here, because I'm a firm believer in that.
Awesome. Well, that's it, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in for episode 4 of the Disclosing the Secret Space Program series here with Emery Smith. I'm Jordan Sather. We'll be seeing you guys again next month. We've got a great episode coming up, and we'll release the name of who will be on it very soon. So take care.